Hey guys, Runesail here. Here to talk to you about this image of my priest Runesail, because that's not confusing at all. Um, so, disclaimer, everything I know comes from either shamelessly stealing it from other artists in terms of their techniques, or teaching myself, or trial and error, or just frantically trying to figure something out on a deadline. I am sure lots of other people will tell you to do things lots of other different ways, and not to be mean, but I don't particularly care. So, my opinion is do your art however it works for you, you know? In terms of process, I mean, there are, of course, other rules regarding, like, anatomy and shit, but, um, like, don't, I'm not particularly gonna quibble on terms of, like, how to do things or how your process quote unquote should be. The truth of the matter is people are going to go on about that all day, but it doesn't really matter. If it looks good at the end of the day and you can make it work, provided nobody else is working with your files, who gives a crap? So, yeah, so normally my images aren't this organized, but I figured it'd be simpler so you guys could see where all the folders are. Generally speaking, I'm going to turn all this off. Generally speaking, I start out with a mid-gray tone here. This is an add-on called Coolerus 2. I paid for it. It's worth paying for. It's super awesome. It gives you lots of different ways to handle color and different modes of handling color and stuff like that. This is, before anybody asks in the frickin' comments, this is Photoshop CS6. Yes, I know I'm old. I am not using a Wacom. I am using an XP Pen Artist 22 HD. And yeah. So there's that. So I've got my setup really minimalist here. I don't like a lot of screen clutter. I like to have a lot of room to work with. So generally with my images, I try to start out on, let's see, let's go back all the way to the original sketch. Which one is that? Not that one. Okay. So generally when I'm working on this stuff, I try to start out with a sketch on a roughly 50% gray canvas. This allows me to track things a little better in terms of like color, and it doesn't burn your eyes out. Like if you're staring at a white canvas forever, it really dries your eyes out and like gives you eye fatigue. So some people do prefer to work on white. Whatever. So I started out here with this sketch that is pretty messy and terrible because I didn't do anything with it. It's just literally the gesture. I sat down, kind of planned the image, went, this would be kind of a cool pose, sure, why not? And then afterwards went back in and refined it. So let me move this back to where it belongs. There we go. Kind of. So generally I go back in and I'll keep these layers on normal. I'll reduce this one to like, 40, 50%, sometimes 20, and then go in and do a more refined sketch on top of it to kind of get my bearings. And then after that, after all of that is said and done, here is the finalized sketch of, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with what I wanted. It's still not the neatest thing in the world. A lot of people will spend hours on this stage alone. I don't have the patience. So I tend to try and work as quickly as possible to keep my focus centered. So let's go back up into here. There we go. Actually, these are in the wrong order, so give me just a second. Boop. No, that is not what I wanted to do. Stop. Go in between. There we go. So after I've got the sketch solidified and kind of where I want it to be, I will reduce that layer down to about 25, 30, 50%, depending on the day. I mean, it's just kind of whatever. So I'm going to turn this on, and nobody freak out because I'm going to have to turn everything off again. Boop, 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 boop. 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 Boop, 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 boop. Boop. Boop, boop. Wait, where'd my lines go? I turned them off because I'm an idiot. There we go. Okay, so... that's why. Here we go. So, my line art I tend to do on multiply at first so I can see what I'm doing again, because sometimes it just kind of gets muddled if you keep it on normal. This is way more layers than I work on normally. Normally I use about 5, but I'm trying out a new thing, so yeah. So I go back in and I start doing actual lines. This stage takes forever. I mean, really, really forever. There's, let's zoom into about 100%. I don't work here, like, I don't work at 100% all the time, but for, sometimes I do, like, on these details. If you look, though, my line art's actually pretty sloppy. It looks good from a distance because I'm working on a large canvas. I work at 300 DPI out of just old graphic design habit, on a A4 canvas most of the time. I'll change that, but I don't work at anything less than that because I like to put a lot of details in what I do. So yeah, to that note, on my line work, I'm using an add-on over here called Lazy Nezumi Pro. I have an issue with the nerves in my arms and shoulders. My hands shake really badly. There's an example of that on my Twitter that I posted in response to the Inktober thing, but the long story short is I have injuries in my hands, and my hands are not very steady anymore. So this line art is made smooth and possible by the help of this lovely program over here. There's a lot of ways that you can mess with it. You can change it so your pressure tracking is slower or faster. You can change it so your tablet responds to more delicate pressure. For me, I have position smoothing turned on so that my lines don't waggle all over the place, and then I have the pressure curve set up. For all the joys I have with this XP pen, one of my personal failings is I can't push down very hard, and I fatigue easily with my hands. So I have the pressure gain and softness turned up a lot, so I don't have to push down as hard. Some days I spend anywhere from 8 to 14 hours sitting at my tablet working, and I can't be like bearing down on the tablet for that long. And death gripping your pen is a sure way to give yourself problems. So other pressure processing stuff, just a little bit of moving average and whatnot. So that's my settings here. If you use this add-on, this is set up specifically for a tablet that isn't a Wacom. So if you put it on a Wacom, you're gonna go, what the heck? Because it'll be like everything will just be way too opaque. But the XP pen has kind of a quirk where you have to push down a little harder. So there's that. So once I've got my line work set in, I usually, and I didn't with this image because I apparently am crazy, where I will go through with the lasso tool and I will actually lasso out the outline of this image. So all the line work gets combined under the lasso tool. I'll go around it, it'll take forever. And then I will just bucket tool on top of it, and make sure that the lines line up on top of the layer. This allows me to cut down on a lot of time in terms of coloring things in. It just makes sure you don't color outside of the lines. So you're creating a masking layer underneath it for your colors to sit on top of. Normally I do this. I didn't do this for this image. Don't know why. So generally one of my favorite things to start out with painting is actually the skin. And this is going to look really wild because this is the last render of this. I can't really go into how I do coloring and stuff like that in this because it's a long story and it takes a while. But so when I'm starting to build up stuff, I generally start with the skin and then start putting in other layers on top of it. So what you have here with all these textures, with all of this stuff, this is all stuff that I have done towards the end of the image. I don't start here. Usually this is going to be just flat, and then I'll paint on top of it. So it's, stop. So it's really not, this is not how this starts. So let me turn on everything here again. I will actually leave that off because that's a lighting effect. So I'm here today to talk to you about lighting effects, because that is one of the things I love doing a lot. Let's see, that's the painted lines. Okay, cool. So with this image, you can see here that this is the unaffected painted layers, basically. Everything in here has already been shaded. That process takes forever. The hair has multiple layers to it as well. So you can see this is where I started. Like, that's the base layer. It's all one layer. It's all painted on one layer because I'm crazy. And then when I want to go back in and add lighting, like serious lighting, I will go in and paint on top of that. This is just a normal layer again. And it's just adding some spots of darkness where I think the hair could use a little more attention. And then on top of that, I put a shadow down here because it's actually kind of receded into the background. One of the things I do with my line art is I tend to, let me turn this one down a lot. I tend to do one kind of line art on the bottom. It's always on multiply, to me it looks really harsh and really black, and so the contrast isn't as delicate as I'd like it to be, especially when we've got this area up in the hair that's actually, her hair is kind of iridescent because I don't know why, it just is. I thought it'd be fun to paint. And see, so you've got black lines in places where there's highlights. So let's zoom in here. So you can see that there's actually really, really dark lines in places where there's light touching, especially back here, where we're gonna get into the glow of this flower in a bit and how I did it. But so you've got, you'll have a really intense light source back here and back here where you've got the light coming back up onto the hair. As you can see, I'm not always the tidiest person with my coloring. So the black lines just really stand out to me. They just seem too noisy, and they seem kind of too stark. So how I alleviate this instead of painting the whole dang thing is I will go up and duplicate my line art layer and turn the original one down to, like, I don't know, 15%, maybe 24, somewhere in there. Doesn't matter. And then up here, I will go in and paint over the line art with a multiply layer, and that allows me, as if you can see here, this is really sloppy. It gets fixed up in the top extras layer here, but as you can see here, that's like it softens out the line art in a lot of places. And I didn't do it everywhere, but I especially did it in the hair and along some of the places in the ears. So yeah, so there's the basic setup of this image. It takes a long time to get to here. I would say this probably took me about 4 or 5 hours to get to this point. The hair alone took me a while, so whatever. So here, where you've got this flat brown painted in, I wanted to do some gold, what the heck is the word for those things? It's gold leaf. I wanted to do gold leaf makeup. I'd seen it on a model on somewhere on the internet, and I went, oh my god, I have to do that. I have to paint that. So here are the highlights for the eyes, by the way. These usually go in last, and we'll turn that glow layer on later. So if we go back down to this is the eye gold, quote unquote, layer. My layers are named funny things. So this is its own layer. I set up basically clipping masks over the top of it, and there's quite a few. So initially I put the gold texture, the gold leaf texture. It's just a stock photo that I had laying around from God knows how long ago. I keep it for this purpose exactly. So, but as you can see, it looks kind of shitty if you just paste it in. It's too bright, it's too loud, it doesn't look good. So then I will go in, and this is on multiply. This layer right here is on multiply. I will go in and paint in some less saturated shadows, and that's starting to look okay. Like, okay, we've got a visible light source, and on multiply it preserves the texture beneath it for the most part, unless you really paint in something dark like over here. But it also preserves your texture, so you don't have to go back in and paint that yourself. And then I will do an overlay layer on top of it, where I will take more saturated colors and paint them into the light and desaturate and darken the back over here and over there. It doesn't look quite as good on that side, but whatever. And then the last thing I can show you here with this is if I put this on normal, you can actually see where I painted where I painted the brown here and this blue on the edge, so it kind of fades into our eye a little better. And then there's actually green up here. So it worked. So doing that takes a while. Let me put that back on overlay. So doing that takes a while. It's kind of a process, but it helps make your textures a little more believable. Back here, in the realm of what the hell is this blob on the back of her head, this is actually a flower. It's a starlight rose, if anybody's familiar with that. Let me turn that back on. So with this, what this actually is, let me turn the effects off. This is actually just white lines right there. That's just some white line art I threw onto the image by itself. The painted layer is somewhere else. I don't know where it is. This right here is on a different layer. And then I put the white line the lines on top of it and kind of painted stuff into here. Now it doesn't look quite right because it's all screwy, but when you go in and turn the effects back on, boop. I don't know why it won't let me turn these back on again. This is weird. There we go. So the effects on this are outer glow and inner glow. Inner glow is particularly fun, as you can, because it turns, basically takes a linear dodge, and I always use linear dodge, by the way. I never use color dodge. Sometimes I'll use screen. Color dodge, I feel, color dodge actually still preserves your darks on the bottom, and with the edges of this, with how bright they were, I didn't want to keep having, like, dark tones underneath it, so it just, linear dodge just disregards any darkness and just paints over it, basically. So I keep it on a fairly low opacity, 37% linear dodge, and then a bright teal color, and that's how it looks. You can mess with this all you want. I like the way it looks. So you can see, without it, you get the line art still looks kind of weak in comparison, like it's darker than the brightest spots on the petals, and I didn't want that. So there's that. Outer glow is my best friend. Again, linear dodge, slightly higher opacity, no gradient. You can screw around with this, but this allows this bright glow to kind of surround the line art. And when you do this, you want it to be, you want your lines to be super clean. Otherwise, you get a mess. And I'll show you over here what I'm talking about. Let me get a brush here. So with these lighting effects, let me pick a blue. With these lighting effects, when you go in, say you want to have somebody who's got like a lightsaber or something, I don't frickin' know, whatever you want, a glowy, pillory thing here. When I want to do lines or an effect with these with these specific lighting effects, I try to keep things as opaque as possible, like at all times. I actually have a brush that is specifically for that. So I'm gonna show you what happens when you don't use a solid brush in terms of your opacity. Whoops. So let's say you've got, I don't know, some kind of sword thing. Heck, but you know, this is varying opacity, right? Or even if you like you're not quite you don't quite have the edges of your whatever the hell you're working on specific enough. So we'll go over to this layer. We'll go to blending modes. You just double click on it, by the way. And then when you go to outer glow, this is what happens. This is on screen, so let me turn it to linear dodge. And then how about a bright blue? Your edges get kind of weird and feathery. Like, so with this, where you can see the edges here, let me actually turn the spread up a bit. Will it behave? No, it won't. I have to turn that up a bit. There we go. So you can see how in this it gets all weird and feathery, and even though you can't see where I accidentally dragged my brush over this way, when you turn on outer glow, any kind of imprecision with your brushwork is going to show up. So size just gives you how far the glow kind of goes, and then spread, I don't really mess with it, but I think it's how far the opacity goes out. So yeah, I think that's what it is. So I don't generally mess with that slider, so I was like, oh, I wonder what that does. So yeah, so you can see that with this, it doesn't quite work. So we are going to go over and grab a very opaque brush and do a couple of lines here. Stop, Photoshop, jeez. It's been, I don't know why recently Photoshop has been dinging at me constantly, and it's super obnoxious. So, so these are all done with a 100% opacity brush. You want to have no transfer on in your brush settings when you're doing this sort of thing, and you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, you know, be it spiral work, be it spell work, you want to make sure like all of your edges are super clean and super precise, otherwise you are going to get a mess. Now, you can paint in these layers by yourself, but I'm lazy. Honestly, I am the world's laziest artist, so I try to figure out the fastest way that I can do things, except when they have me painting on the wrong layer. It's one of those days, y'all. Boop, 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 boop. Just a second. Did something stupid. There. So you want to make sure these are also on their own layer, like I just did not. So here's our sword light post thing. I don't know. I'll make some swirlies here for spell effects. And I actually like to go in and do these actually pretty ornate spell wheels, but I'm not going to draw one here right now because this is already getting kind of long. It's like 20 minutes, jeez. So at any rate, so here you've got your kind of your spell work or whatever bullshit. And we're going to go to Outer Glow, and since we picked a brush that doesn't have feathery edges or any of that crap, we can go over here, set this to linear dodge. And you can actually pick the same color-ish. So let's just grab that sky blue. And so you can play with this as far as you want. You want to generally... Photoshop, please. Generally want to pick a more saturated color than you start with, and a brighter color, and then you want to turn the opacity down, because it looks like garbage if it's all the way up. Like, you can do this, but it just looks weird. So don't. So I like to, if I've got like a blue thing here going on that I'll paint further light into later, I'll just add a really, really faint glow onto the top of it. Now, you can also do this with, like, if you're doing like a white spell effect, like if you've got like a white fire or something, I don't know what. You can do the same thing. I like to use this super gross bright blue color. So I'm gonna turn that up and then turn that down. So with on like white objects like this, you can turn up the spread as far as you want, but I like to give this about anywhere, depending on your canvas size, like this is going to change. So you can do anywhere from, 8 to 9 pixels, so you get kind of a subtler glow. If you're going to go bigger than that, you actually want to turn the opacity down a little bit, and then turn the spread up just a bit. So like you can turn this up a bit, and then turn your size down a little, and turn the opacity down, just depending on what you're doing. If you want to go full frickin' spell work is loud, you can mess with the opacity and do whatever you like. Color dodge does a slightly different thing. It just looks different, and I don't particularly care how it looks. I'm sure there's some fancy explanation for why it does this, but I don't care. I don't mess with it. So there's that. Not saving. So back to our image here. That's how I did this back up there. Let's see. What else can I tell you? Stuff, things. Oh, backgrounds. We'll get to that. So, okay, so I'm going to turn on actually the real background to this so you can see what it looks like. I started with a gradient. Ignore all that. I started with a gradient that is darker at the bottom, lighter at the top. The reason I chose this to do this is because I have a lot of light. I have a lot of light on the bottom here. Like it's very, very bright, very, very loud on this end. And up here it's darker, but not by much. So I wanted to... Photoshop, stop dinging, dang. I wanted to go in and add a little bit of light to call more attention to the top of her face and her hair. So that's where this starts, in terms of all of this. Let me go up here. Now, what I didn't do, because I'm an idiot, is include these glows. Oh, it's raining. That's nice. It doesn't rain here very often. I mean, it does, but whatever. So I forgot to turn these on. Again, I think this is on linear dodge, not screen. So here's color dodge. Like, okay, this is a great example of why I don't use this. So if you look at this from the standpoint of color dodge, you can see that it burns out your colors really, badly through here. Like, everything looks really washed out and super saturated and really gross. And some people use color dodge exclusively, some don't. I don't care. But it makes things really hyper-saturated and kind of disgusting, in my opinion. At least when you're doing glowy light effects. Linear dodge is a little gentler. As you can see, it doesn't preserve those dark edges at all. See? It's linear dodge, color dodge. I prefer the way linear dodge looks because it actually washes out some of your darks, and keeps the lighting source a little more consistent, but that's me. Also, you can put it on, screen, and that's kind of, I guess, a happy medium with less saturation. So, whatever floats your goat. The next thing I do when I get to this stage... is I start adding extra touches. I add little bits and pieces of, like, if I notice, oh shit, well, her eyelashes look weird, or crap, I forgot to paint something, or whatever. This is the layer I picked to do retouching on, and I'm gonna turn this folder on and turn all this off. So with the extra touches layer, final touches, whatever, I go back in and add a lot of stuff, as you can see. This is usually the last thing I do, aside from the background, and I wait before I do this. I usually give myself anywhere between, like, 2 and 4 hours, or even a day before I come back to it. I'll usually go work on something else, because it gives my eyes a chance to relax, and not look at this. What I did here is I added in some chain, not on, in terms of like the little earring things back here. That's actually just a stitch brush, like for like stitching, like sewing, but it's sufficiently small sizes. There we go. There's that phrase. English is hard. It looks actually rather like a very tiny chain, so that's what I use it for a lot. And it's easier than going and adding, as you can see back here, these little dots. You got the time for that. Just grab you a brush. So the final touches layer adds in a lot. I detail in eyelashes and, you know, the floaty colors from her eyes, since she's a night elf. I go back in and add extra hairs and all kinds of little things. So yeah, that's what that's layer. That is what that layer is for. And correcting any little things that I noticed that I goofed up on or that I want to change. As a note, it's actually really good to like back up half of your canvas and look at it from a distance, you know, because I have a tendency to spend all of my time, you know, super zoomed in, and it's not good for your eyes, my friends. And also you miss stuff, like you miss the big picture. So even if I prefer working on textures at 100% at all times, where I want to detail skin and eye stuff forever, don't. Like, actually zoom out, look at things. So this next layer is the chains. Actually, I forgot to name it, but the little chains that I've got for her jewelry, they're not particularly well detailed because, again, they're tiny and who ain't got time for that. But on the, like, if we zoom into like 142%, where I actually painted this, shush, you can see that I added some lighting into it. Not particularly detailed, just enough to give it some dimension. Another thing I like to do with this is add, when I'm in a hurry or I'm just being lazy, is I'll add a drop shadow to chain. So this is a brush, actually. This is, I don't even know whose brush this is. I literally don't know where I picked up half of this stuff anymore. Boop, 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 boop. It's somewhere in here. There's a chain brush that I like to use, and it's a flat brush. It's completely opaque, and then I go back in over it and paint lighting on it, because it's just easier that way. So with that, let me find my layers again. You know, when you zoom out off of it, even to about 50%, it still looks half decent. So, and most of the time I only upload it like 34% to Twitter and stuff like that, because uploading your high resolution images where everybody can get to them is kind of a dumb idea. Just putting that out there. Like, if you upload stuff without a watermark at full resolution, expect it to get stolen. Not because, like, that's acceptable, but because people are shitty and steal our work all the time. So, watermark your stuff! Don't upload it in full resolution unless people pay for it. Yeah, okay. Then that top layer up here is my signature. So, there's that. I did forget when I uploaded this to Twitter, I did forget to put on these glows. And so now you can see against the background, with all the extras on top of it, what that looks like. Going back and looking at it, I actually don't like it as much with the glows because I lose a lot of the filigree detail, but, you know, your mileage may vary. Also, it wasn't up that high. It's just, I put it usually at about 50%. Again, linear dodge, soft airbrush, just paint in your light. Do whatever. Now we have a rave. I'm a nerd. Okay. So there's my signature on top of that. I actually just keep this in a separate file. I need to like make a vectored version of it, but whatever. Okay, so all that said, for the background, and this is what a lot of people asked me about earlier, how I do this neon technique back here. I do this a lot, or have started doing this a lot recently because, I don't know, it's fun. So this is literally just some shapes I grabbed together. Like I literally grabbed the square tool and turned it on their side, added this cool little retro moon thing that should be centered but isn't because you can't tell anyway. Yeah. I added that cool moon detail in the back because she's a night elf priestess. So, how I did this is super, super freaking simple. First you go, let's turn off outer glow. First you go to gradient overlay, right over here. Put this on normal. Pick yourself a gradient that you like. Doesn't matter what it is. You can make your own. Doesn't matter. You know, you can do this however you like. You can have a rainbow gradient, because why the hell not? And you can also change the behavior of the gradient. Here, this is like linear, radial, like at an angle if you really want. You can change the angle of that if you're feeling particularly excitable. I don't know. There was a word, it just got lost. Align with layer just screws with how it looks. And you can change the scale. So like if you only want a little bit, like if you want a lot of red, but only a little bit of rainbow, you can turn the outside to red, or if you want the whole thing to be blue, whatever. So you can mess with that however you like. I tend to like when I do this on linear. Actually, we're just gonna, there we go. I tend to like my gradients on linear just because they look good that way. So 100%, 90-degree angle, align with layer on normal. And I wanted to pick images from the main figure, God, that were not dominant. So like the gold chains and then the purple gems and stuff like that. I put that in the background to bring more of those colors into the image so it balanced better. I'm sure there's some theory behind this, and I learned it somewhere, but I can't tell you why I do this. I just do it because it looks good. Which is like, oh, my art teachers would be ashamed of me. So, at any rate, the last thing I do with this is I throw an outer glow on it. Again, linear dodge. I picked gold because it looked nice and it harmonized okay with the background here. So, and the size is 35 pixels, but you can turn it down a little bit or you can turn it up. You can do whatever you want. It's your world, your creation, something, 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 Bob Ross. Let's see here. What else? So that's lighter color. Color dodge. Yeah, whatever. So color dodge doesn't show up as well in dark backgrounds. So do whatever you like. Hit cancel. So there's that image. Like, that is all there is to this in terms of this background. This is very, very simple. This is just some shapes with a gradient on them. There's another way you can set up the gradient if you really want, or you could paint in your own gradient, but you got time for that. Oh, okay, so... Wow, sorry about that. So, with this, this right here, this is actually just, this is just a star brush, like a Starfield brush, with a lot of crap thrown on top of it. Now, what I started out with was just a white star brush, and then what I did is I grabbed an airbrush, and I went to my brush options over here and turned on color dynamics and just put the hue jitter up all the way. So every time you put down your brush with hue jitter, your paint turns a different color no matter what you're working with. So I will show you that here. Let me get my layers back up. Boop. So like, keep in mind that I'm going to start with blue, right? Here's blue. Oh wait, it's not blue at... Oh god, why is nothing the right color? So yeah, that's what that does. Here with color dynamics on top of it, and you can actually turn the hue jitter down so it stays closer to your original color. You can mess with the saturation jitter so things are more saturated, and the brightness jitter so you get different kinds of, like the brightness jitter gives you different values in whatever you're working with. So if you turn the hue jitter up all the way, the saturation jitter up all the way, brightness jitter up all the way, you get craziness. It just generates random colors for you, which is kind of cool. So every time you put your brush down, you get a new color, which is kind of neat. I just learned about that like yesterday. So there you go. Let me delete that because that doesn't belong there. So when I went in to make this layer here, you see it's locked, so I can't paint on the transparent pixels. I grabbed myself a giant ass airbrush and went through and just painted. I started with blue, screwed around with the brush settings up here over a bit, and then just added some color variation. That's all there is on top of that. Now the effects, again, really dumb, really simple. It's just outer glow. Ignore the fact that it says bevel and emboss on there. I was trying something, it didn't work, and there's no shame in that, because I try a lot of things that don't work. But, there's a self-deprecating joke in there, but it's gone. Anyway, so there's a lot of different ways you can do this, but I picked linear dodge with a dark blue and put it over the stars so they twinkle a little bit, and there you go. I don't know why I'm yawning. I'm not actually tired. Sorry. So when you combine all that with the figure and the extras on top of it, and the glows, if you like, that is how this image came together. Sorry for that really long, rambling explanation. Stop it, Photoshop. Oh my god. Sorry for that really long, rambling explanation. I'm not good at explaining things simply, but hopefully that will provide you a little bit of insight into how I made this. I'm sorry I didn't record it. I totally just forgot to. And again, with like, let's arrange this by date and go up to this one. Here we go. So, where's the file? Oh my god. I've lost it. For heck's sake. I did this image of our guild's paladin tank. His name is Valorosa, and if you're a nerd like I am, you would recognize the Malaguena Valorosa thing, but, you know, it's a dumb reference. Anyway, so again, with the same thing with this background, which is why I'm opening this, by the way. Where is it? There it is. So, you know, there's a lot of lighting effects back here, but again, simple triangle with, and I didn't merge these, simple triangle with the glow on it, and that's how that came together. And then there's one more. Airy. I think it's that one, hopefully. Yeah. So this one I actually didn't add any crazy background effects into, no space lights or anything. So yeah, same deal with the neon. Since it was really bright at the bottom, I added some darkness at the top. Again, same deal with the line art where I painted over it. Same deal with the color glows. These are actually, as crazy as it sounds, these are actually really simple to make because of just the amount of layer effects that I pour onto these. And anybody who is a veteran artist could look at this and goes, "Wow, that's really cheap." Yes, it is. So yeah. Lots of texture overlays. So that's how these are made. They're dead simple in terms of how I messed with them. So Rune, of course, is the most complex one because I kind of got lost when I was doing it. So yeah, that's all I got. This isn't particularly like professional, and there's no like fancy overlays or super awesome music or whatever. So if you're still here listening to me, hey, that's awesome. You just sat and listened to me talk for like 37 minutes. You poor person. I'm so sorry. Anyway, catch me wherever I am on Twitter, I'm on Twitch, I'm everywhere. If there's a rune sale, it's me. If there's a Mercy yelling at you in Overwatch, that's probably me. Yeah, so that's it. That's all I got. Keep drawing, don't be mean to each other, and catch you later.